You ever notice how weddings always smell like nerves and perfume? That mix of anxiety and lavender that makes you question if anyone actually wants to be there, or if we're all just too far in to back out. That morning, everything looked perfect. White roses on every table, linen napkins folded like tiny origami swans. The kind of setup people post on Instagram with captions like, "Forever starts today," but forever was already starting to itch. I stood in front of the mirror, straightening my tie for the 5th time. My reflection looked calm, but my gut wasn't buying it. I'd spent months planning this day, every detail down to the playlist for the reception. But something about Lena's silence that morning didn't sit right. She wasn't her usual self. Normally, she'd be running the show, bossing florists around like a general in heels. Instead, she kept pacing in front of her vanity, reapplying the same shade of lipstick like it might erase whatever was bothering her. I knocked on the doorframe of the bridal suite. "Hey," I said softly. "You good?" She jumped like I'd caught her doing something. "Yeah," she said quickly. "Just trying to keep the mascara from clumping." "Clumping?" I smiled, stepping inside. "You've been blending the same spot for 10 minutes. Her laugh came out brittle, like a cracked window in winter. Big day jitters, I guess. I wanted to believe her. I really did. But when I leaned in to kiss her cheek, she flinched. Barely. Just enough that anyone else might have missed it. I didn't. "Lena," I said, my hand still hovering near her shoulder. "Is everything okay?" She turned to face me, eyes glassy, but determined. "Of course. Why wouldn't it be?" Her tone was sharp, rehearsed, like someone reading off a script they didn't write. I didn't press. I figured maybe this was her way of processing. The morning of your wedding, emotions run wild. That's what everyone says, right? Except, I'd known Lena long enough to recognize when something wasn't nerves. It was guilt. Or fear, maybe both. Still, I smiled and said what any groom who didn't want to ruin the day would. "All right, but promise me, if you need to run, at least wait until after the cake's cut." That got a real laugh out of her. Small but genuine. "You're ridiculous." "I try," I said. "It's in the job description." She touched my tie then, straightened it like it mattered, and for a brief second, it felt like us again. The way we used to be before wedding planners and seating charts and the weight of expectations turned love into a project. Outside, the band started warming up. A cello hummed through the walls, low and haunting. Our cue. I brushed a thumb across her cheek and whispered, "See you at the altar." She nodded. "See you there." But as I walked out of that room, I caught her reflection in the mirror behind me, her lips still moving after I left, whispering something I couldn't hear. It wasn't my name. Now, I ain't no TikTok wedding planner, but if your bride needs 3 shots of tequila before walking down the aisle, you might want to check if she's marrying you or her anxiety. Anyway, hit that subscribe button. Keeps my sanity caffeinated. Back to the aisle. From that moment on, I couldn't shake the feeling that something inside her had already left the room. Like the vows were just formalities for a love that expired a few days ago, and no one told me. But I pushed the thought away, adjusted my cufflinks, and smiled for the cameras. Because that's what you do on your wedding day. You perform. Even if the stage lights are about to burn everything down. The ceremony went off without a hitch. At least, that's what it looked like from the outside. The country club's ballroom glowed with golden light. Candles flickered across polished tables, violins hummed in the background, and a $1,000 photographer floated around like a paparazzi mosquito, snapping shots of forever. Lena was stunning. Of course she was. Every step she took down that aisle was rehearsed perfection. Chin up, bouquet forward, eyes locked on me. But I wasn't sure if she was walking toward me or away from something else. When she finally reached me, her hand felt cold. Colder than it should have been for a September evening. Still, I smiled. Everyone was watching. You can't look nervous when you've already paid the deposit. We said the vows, exchanged looks that were half love, half exhaustion, and when the officiant pronounced us almost married, everyone clapped like a live studio audience. Then came the reception. That's where the real story began. The speeches. If you've ever been to a wedding, you know how they go. Half heartfelt, half awkward stand-up comedy. The best man, my buddy Marcus, went first. Classic material, embarrassing college stories, bad puns, and a toast so strong it nearly burned through the champagne flutes. Then came Tori, the maid of honor, Lena's best friend since high school, the one who helped pick out her dress, planned the bridal shower, and somehow managed to make sarcasm look elegant. She stepped up to the mic in a rose gold dress, glass in hand, smile trembling just enough to notice. I thought it was nerves. Turns out it was something else entirely. "Hi everyone," Tori began, her voice bright but shaky. "I've known Lena for 15 years, and I can honestly say she's one of the most passionate people I've ever met." The crowd awed. Cameras flashed. I smiled. "Because that's what you do when people compliment your bride," she went on, weaving through memories about college nights, failed dates, inside jokes about bad tequila, and worse decisions. Everyone laughed, especially Lena. For a moment, it felt normal. Then Tori paused. It was small at first, barely a heartbeat, but in that silence, something shifted. Her voice softened. "But love isn't always what it seems." The laughter faded. The air thickened. Lena's smile twitched, just slightly. Tori looked down at her glass, then back at the crowd. Sometimes, the person we trust most lies to both of us. A ripple of confusion spread across the room. Someone in the back coughed. The DJ turned down the background music like even he knew better. I blinked. "Wait, both of us?" I looked at Lena. She wasn't laughing anymore. Her face drained of color. She whispered something under her breath, but her mic caught it. "Tori, don't." Tori's eyes glistened. "I'm sorry, Lena, but he deserves to know." My stomach dropped. I didn't know what was coming yet, but I could feel the weight of it pressing on the air, like a thunderstorm about to break. Tori set her glass down. Her hands were shaking now. "Ethan," she said quietly, turning to me, "please know I never meant to hurt you." The crowd went dead silent. Even the candles seemed to stop flickering. If life had a remote control, that's when I would have hit pause. Because something was coming. Something I wasn't ready to hear. But I just sat there, frozen in my tux, smiling like a man still pretending his world wasn't about to implode. I glanced at Lena. Her jaw was tight. Her eyes were begging for mercy. Not from Tori, but from the truth. And that's when I realized whatever was about to be said wasn't going to save my marriage. It was going to end it. If there's one sound I'll never forget, it's the way the microphone squealed right before Tori spoke again. That high-pitched feedback that slices through laughter, through denial, through every lie trying to stay hidden. She steadied it, took a deep breath, and said the words that ripped the night in half. "Ethan, I'm so sorry. Lena's been seeing Ryan." It was like someone unplugged reality. The crowd gasped, collective disbelief swirling through the room like static. Ryan, Tori's fiancé, froze at his table, his fork halfway to his mouth. My mind couldn't keep up. I blinked, trying to process the words, but they just bounced around like ricocheting bullets. "Lena's been seeing Ryan." I turned to her. My bride. The woman who spent the last 6 months arguing over centerpiece colors like her life depended on it. Her mouth opened, then shut again, like she was searching for an excuse that didn't exist. "Tori," she hissed through her teeth, "you don't know what you're talking about." Tori's eyes filled with tears. "I do, Lena. I have messages, calls, receipts. You told me it was a mistake, that it was over." She swallowed hard, her voice breaking. "But I couldn't stand up here and pretend anymore. I couldn't toast to your marriage knowing what you did to his." Every head in that ballroom turned to me. I could feel their stares, pity, curiosity, morbid fascination, like they were all watching a slow-motion car crash and couldn't look away. Lena grabbed my hand across the table. Her nails dug into my skin. "Ethan, please, let's just talk. Not here. Not like this." "Not like this," I said, my voice low, steady. "When were you planning to tell me, Lena? On our honeymoon? Between cocktails and couples massages?" Her bottom lip trembled. "I made a mistake. I ended it months ago. Tori shook her head. You saw him last week. And that was it. That was the final nail. A simple statement that confirmed every suspicion I didn't even know I had. I pushed back from the table. The chair screeched across the marble floor, sharp enough to cut through the whispers. Every sound in the room, the music, the laughter, the clinking glasses, had vanished. I looked at Tori. She couldn't meet my eyes. Then I looked at Ryan, who suddenly found his tie extremely interesting. Finally, I looked at Lena, the woman in white who couldn't stop shaking. You didn't just cheat, I said quietly. You rehearsed it. You planned this wedding knowing what you'd done. She reached out again, desperate, trembling. Ethan, please. I stepped back. No, don't. You already made your vows to someone else. Now pause right there, 'cause I know half of y'all are sitting there yelling, Bro, I would have flipped the whole table. Sure you would. Until it's your tux, your family, your friends, all staring at you like a live episode of Heartbreak Karaoke. So before you judge, hit that subscribe. Keeps the lights on, and my therapy bills justified. Back to the chaos. Lena started crying. The ugly kind of crying. The kind that smears mascara and makes people realize this isn't a show anymore. Tori set the microphone down, her hands trembling. I'm sorry, she whispered again. You deserve to know the truth. For a second, I almost felt sorry for her too. She looked broken, haunted by the weight of what she'd done and what she'd said. But sympathy could wait. Because right then, I wasn't just a man whose wedding had fallen apart. I was a man who'd just seen the truth unwrapped in front of 200 people and realized it was the ugliest gift I'd ever received. Lena covered her face, sobbing into her hands as I turned and walked toward the exit. The sound of my footsteps echoed louder than the applause ever had, and for the first time that day, I felt calm. Not happy, not angry, just done. The thing about silence is, it's louder than screaming. When Tori dropped that bomb and the whole ballroom went mute, I swear I could hear my heartbeat echoing off the walls. Lena was still crying into her hands. Tori was frozen at the mic, chest rising and falling like she'd just run a marathon in heels. And me? I just stood there, staring at the table, set for a marriage that was already dead. Someone at another table coughed. The band looked terrified to play another note. Even the waiters froze mid-step, holding trays of champagne like props in a crime scene. That's when I realized I had a choice. I could blow up, cuss her out, flip the cake, make headlines. Or I could do the one thing no one expected. Keep my dignity. I walked toward the mic. Each step felt like it was happening in slow motion, like I was walking through water. Lena reached out as I passed her. Ethan, please, don't. I stopped just long enough to look at her. Her makeup had melted into streaks, her lips trembling around another excuse I'd already heard 100 times in my head. Don't worry, I said quietly. I'm not here to embarrass you. You've done enough of that for both of us. She froze. Tori stepped back. The mic was still warm in her hand when I took it. I looked out at the crowd, our families, our friends, people who'd flown in, spent money, bought gifts for a future that no longer existed. Then I smiled. Wow, I said. Tori, that was one hell of a speech. Can't say it's what I expected, but I appreciate the honesty. A few nervous chuckles scattered around the room, like they weren't sure if it was safe to laugh. I nodded toward Tori. You did what no one else could do. Told me the truth. And for that, thank you. Then I turned to Lena. You know, I used to think love was about sacrifice, about forgiving mistakes and pushing through. But what I learned tonight, I paused, letting the silence stretch until it hurt, is that some people don't need forgiveness. They need consequences. Her tears came harder. Ethan, I'm begging you. I shook my head. No need to beg. You're free now, and so am I. I reached into my pocket, took off my ring, and set it down on the table beside her untouched glass of champagne. It made the smallest sound when it hit the linen, like punctuation at the end of a sentence that had gone on too long. Then I looked back at everyone, still staring. Drinks are on me. The wedding's off. Enjoy the food. And with that, I turned and walked away. Now, ever notice how life's like a bad sitcom rerun? Same arguments, new outfits, and somehow you're still paying the subscription fee. Hit that subscribe so you can watch me cancel this season in real time. Back to the mess. When I stepped outside, the night air hit like mercy. The music behind me stumbled back on, muffled through the walls. Someone had tried to keep the party going. I almost laughed. The sky was clear, the stars showing up like they hadn't been invited, but came anyway. For the first time all day, I could breathe. No tucks too tight, no fake smiles, no pretending I didn't already see the cracks forming months ago. Just me and the open road waiting outside the parking lot. I didn't look back. Didn't need to. Because you can't rebuild something that was built on a lie. And I wasn't walking away from love. I was walking toward peace. It's been 6 weeks since I walked out of that ballroom. Funny how peace doesn't come with fanfare. No big moment, no applause, just silence. And silence, when you've been living in noise, feels like healing. The first few days were rough. I'll be honest. I kept replaying that night like a bad movie stuck on repeat. Her tears, Tori's voice, the gasps, the click of my shoes on marble. For a while, I thought maybe I'd made a mistake. Maybe I should have stayed, let her explain, let the dust settle. But every time that thought came up, I'd remember her flinch when I kissed her that morning. That tiny telling moment I tried to write off as nerves. Turns out my gut had been screaming the truth long before the microphone did. I moved out of our apartment 2 weeks later, boxed up my life into 6 cardboard reminders of how fast trust can rot. Every photo felt like a joke I wasn't in on. Every forever frame suddenly had an expiration date. My mom tried to convince me to talk to Lena. Closure, she said, but closure isn't a conversation. It's a decision. And I'd already made mine. Now, most mornings, I sit on my porch with a beer instead of coffee. Neighbors wave, not realizing they're waving at a man who almost said I do to someone who didn't. The sky feels bigger now. Or maybe I just finally started looking up. Lena texted me last week, a long message. Paragraphs about regret, guilt, how she wishes she could undo it all. I didn't respond, because some stories don't need sequels. They just need endings. As for Tori, she reached out too. Not to apologize again, but to say she's in therapy, trying to piece herself back together after losing both a fiancé and a best friend in one night. I told her something simple. Thank you for telling the truth. It saved me. The funny thing is, people always talk about heartbreak like it's the end. But really, it's a beginning. A brutal, necessary reboot of your soul. And once you get through it, you stop chasing peace. You start protecting it. So yeah, my wedding never happened. But I still got my vows in. They just weren't to her. They were to myself. To never ignore the quiet signs again. To walk away when love starts costing more than it gives. And to never ever settle for someone who makes lying look easy. If you've ever been blindsided by the truth, you know the feeling. The sting. The silence. The strange relief that comes after. So tell me, what would you have done if your fiancé's best friend exposed everything right there at the altar? Would you walk out too? Or try to salvage the wreckage? Drop your thoughts below. And if this story hit close to home, subscribe for more real stories, real heartbreaks, and the kind of truth that doesn't come with a happy filter. Because here's the thing about love. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is leave before the vows finish.